Hello children, welcome to Nagesh Karasgi Orchid School channel. In the last session, we have read table 1, that is about Mughal emperors. Okay. Then we read about their traditions and of succession. Then Mughal relations with other rulers, Mansabdars and Jagirdars, then Zabt and Zamindars. Now we read even Akbarnama also, that is in a Akbari. Now we are going to next part, page number 53, that is a closer look Akbar's policies. Okay. Now we saw what is Akbarnama in the last session. Now a closer look Akbar's policies. What are the policies? Let's see. The broad features of administration were laid down by Akbar and were elaborately discussed by Abdul Fazl in his book, who wrote this Akbarnama, the Akbarnama, in particular in its last volume, the In-e-Akbari. Abdul Fazl explained that the empire was divided into provinces called Subas, governed by a Subedar, who carried out both political and military functions. Each province also had a financial officer or diwan for the maintenance of peace and order in his province. The Subedar was supported by other officers such as military paymaster, the minister in charge of religious and charitable patronage, military commanders and town police commander Kotwal. So here Abdul Fazl explained that the empire was divided into provinces called Subas. They were divided and those were governed by whom? Subedar, who carried out both political as well as military functions. Each province, each part also had a financial officer and he is called as Diwan for maintaining peace and order in his province, to maintain the peace and order. The Subedar was supported by other officers such as military paymasters. He was supported by other officers also like military paymaster, that is Bakshi, the minister in charge of religious and charitable patronage, Satr, and military commanders, Faujdars, and town police commanders. That is called, those are called Kotwal. Okay. Now, Noor Jahan's influence in Jahangir's court. Who is Noor Jahan? Mehrunisa married the Emperor Jahangir in 1611 and received a title Noor Jahan. She married to whom? Emperor Jahangir, and she was titled as Noor Jahan. She remained extremely loyal and supportive to the monarch. As a mark of honor, Jahangir struck silver coins bearing his own titles on one side, and on the other side inscription struck in the name of the Queen Begum Noor Jahan. So the coin was, it was two-sided. On one side, what it was? His own titles, and the other side the inscription, it was stuck in the name of Queen Begum Noor Jahan. The adjoining document is an order Farman of Noor Jahan. The square seal states, this is square seal, it states command of her most sublime and elevated majesty Noor Jahan's Pacha Begum. The round seal states by son of Shah Jahangir, she became as brilliant as the moon. May Noor Jahan's Pacha be the lady of the age. So here this is the square seal. Here it is mentioned that, see, now here the great, sublime means great, The adjoining document, this is the document, it is called Farman of Noor Jahan. The square seal states that command of her most great and elevated majesty Noor Jahan's Padshah Begum. The round seal, it states that, what it states, by the son of Shah Jahangir, she became as brilliant as the moon. She is as brilliant as the moon, so it is a round shape. Okay. So this is Noor Jahan's influence in Jahangir's court. Now Akbar's nobles commanded large armies and had access to large amounts of revenue. While they were loyal, the empire functioned efficiently, but by the end of the 17th century, many nobles had built independent networks of their own. Their loyalties to the empire were weakened by their own self-interest. Now here Akbar's nobles commanded large armies and had access to large amounts of revenue also. While they were loyal, the empire functioned efficiently. When they were very loyal, everything was functioning very efficiently. But by the end of 17th century, what happened? These nobles had built their own independent networks of their own, and their loyalties to the empire were weakened. It became less, and why it became less? Because they were taking their own self-interest. While Akbar was Fatehpur Sikri during the 1570s, he started discussions on the religion with ulama, Brahmins, Jesuit priests who were Roman Catholics and Zoroastrians. So while Akbar was at Fatehpur Sikri during 1570s, he started to discuss on religion with whom he was discussing? Brahmanas, Jesuits means who were the priests of Roman Catholics, and Zoroastrians. These discussions took place in the Ibadat Khana. He was interested in the religion and social customs and different people. Akbar's interaction with people of different faiths made him realize that the religious scholars who emphasized ritual and dogma were often bigots. Their teachings created divisions and disharmony amongst his subjects. So here what happened now, when he was taking interest in religion and social customs in different, Akbar's interaction with the people, he came to know that faiths made him realize that religious scholars who emphasized ritual, that is dogma means a statement or an interpretation declared as authoritative with the expectation that it would be followed without question. They should not question. It is called dogma. The people, they should not question, they should follow it. And bigot means an individual who is intolerant of another person's religious beliefs or culture. So here an individual who is intolerant of another person's religious beliefs of culture. So these are called ritual and dogma were often bigots. Their teachings created divisions and disharmony amongst the subjects. This eventually led Akbar to an idea of Saleh-Kul or universal peace. This idea of tolerance did not discriminate between people of different religions in his realm. So here now this Akbar led to an idea that he should maintain universal peace. This idea of tolerance did not discriminate between people of different religions in the realm. Realm means in his kingdom. Instead, it focused on a system of ethics, honesty, justice, peace that was universally applicable. Abdul Fazl helped Akbar in framing a vision of governance around this idea. Saleh-Kul, this principle of governance was followed by Jahangir and Shah Jahan as well. Whatever the policies these were made by Akbar, these principles were followed by even Jahangir and Shah Jahan. Jahangir, Saleh-Kul, Jahangir, Akbar's son, described his father's policy of Salekul in the following words. As in the wide expanse of the divine compassion, there is room for all classes and the followers of all creeds. So, in his imperial dominions, which on all sides were limited, only by the sea there was room for the professors of opposite religions, and for beliefs good and bad, and the road to intolerance was closed. Sunnis and Shias met in one mosque and Christians and Jews in one church to pray. He is consistently followed the principle of universal peace. He was trying to make the people equal. He was bringing the all people together so that peace should be maintained. Now next we will go to the Mughal Empire in the 17th century. The administrative and military efficiency of the Mughal Empire led to great economic and commercial prosperity. International travelers described it as the fabled land of wealth. Now here in the 17th century, the administrative and military efficiency of the Mughal Empire, they were managing everything very properly, which led to great economic and commercial prosperity. Okay. International travelers, they were describing it as the fabled land of wealth. So, but these same visitors were also appalled at the state. Appalled means horrified. Okay. They appalled at the state of poverty that existed side by side with the great, what it is? Opulence. Opulence means great wealth. It is a wealth. The inequalities were glaring. Okay. Glaring means reflecting. The inequalities were glaring. Documents from the 20th year of Shah Jahan's reign inform us that the highest ranking Mansabdars were only 445 in number out of a total of 8,000. This small number, a mere 5.6% of the total number of Mansabdars, received 61.5% of the total estimated revenue of the empire as salaries for themselves and their troopers. Now here see, now documents which from the 20th year of Shah Jahan's rule inform us that the highest ranking Mansabdars were only 445 in number, whereas the total was 8,000. This small number, only the percentage 5.6% of the total number of Mansabdars were receiving 61.5% of the total estimated revenue, whatever they were collecting of the empire as salaries. Okay. The Mughal emperors and their Mansabdars spent a great deal for their income on salaries and goods. This expenditure benefited the artisans and peasantry who supplied them with goods and produce, but the scale of revenue collection left very little for investment in the hands of the primary producers, the peasant and the artisan. The poorest among them lived from hand to mouth, and they could not hardly consider investing in additional resources, tools and supplies to increase productivity. Now whatever the revenue was collected, it was very less and it was only sufficient for their food. They could not expand it by purchasing tools or to increase their productivity. This revenue was not sufficient. The wealthier peasantry and the artisanal groups, the merchants and the bankers profited in the economic world. Only the wealthier, those who were rich, those peasantries, artisanal groups and the merchants and the bankers, profited in this economic world. The enormous wealth and the resources commanded by the Mughal elite made them an extremely powerful group of people in the late 17th century. As the authority of the Mughal emperor slowly declined, his servants emerged as powerful centers of power in the regions. They constituted new dynasties and held command of provinces like Hyderabad and Awadh. Although they continued to recognize the Mughal emperor in Delhi as their master, by the 18th century the provinces of the empire had consolidated their independent political identities. We will read more about them in chapter 10. So, we are going to read more about this in chapter 10. So, here the enormous wealth and resources commanded by the Mughal elite made them extremely powerful. Because of good wealth and resources, they became very powerful. In the late 17th century, as the authority of the Mughal emperor slowly they became less, declined, his servants emerged as powerful centers of power in the regions. Okay. They constituted new dynasties, they started their own provinces and held command of provinces like Hyderabad and Awadh. Okay. In this way, it has, although they continued to recognize the Mughal emperor in Delhi as their master, their servants only, they started their own province. Although they are considering Mughal emperors as their masters, by 18th century the provinces of empire had consolidated their independent political identities. They lost their political identities. This we are going to read in chapter 10. Okay, now kings and queens. There were several great monarchs, all near contemporaries. Contemporaries means a person living at the same time, the people living at the same time in different parts of the world in the 16th century. Now, we are going to see some about the kings and queens. These included the ruler of Ottoman Turkey, Sultan Suleiman, 1520-1566. During his rule, the Ottoman state expanded. Okay, it expanded into Europe, seizing Hungary and besieging Austria. His armies also seized Baghdad and Iraq. Much of North Africa all the way to Morocco acknowledged Ottoman authority. Suleiman also reconstructed the Ottoman navy. Its domination over the eastern Mediterranean brought the navy into competition with Spain. In the Arabian Sea, it challenged Portuguese. The monarch was given the title of Al-Kanuni, the lawgiver, because of the larger number of regulations, Kanun, passed during his reign. These were aimed at standardized administrative procedures throughout the expanding domains of the empire, and specifically to protect the peasantry from forced labor and extraordinary taxes. Later in the 17th century, when public order declined in the Ottoman domains, the reign of Suleiman Kanuni was remembered as a period of idle governance. So, here the law was made where the peasants, normal farmers, they were stopped from exploitation, so that they were not forced to as laborers, or they were not forced to give extra taxes. So, by this Kanun, means by this law, they were getting the justice. And in 17th century, when the public order declined in the Ottoman domains, the reign of Suleiman Kanuni was remembered as a period. It is a idle governance. It was remembered as a idle governance. Find out more about Akbar's other contemporaries: the ruler of England, Queen Elizabeth, 1558 to 1603, the Safavid ruler of Iran, Shah Abbas, 1588-1629, and more controversial Russian ruler Tsar Ivan Vasilevich, also called Ivan the Terrible. Okay, in this some of other names are given whom are remembered. Okay, in this way we have completed the lesson. Now these are the exercise it is given, just orally we can take it or as the notes are sent. So let's move to the some of the videos like
This chapter deals with the following subtopics: Mughals, Akbar, succession and relations, administration, progeny of Mughals.
Taj Mahal is a living testimony of the grandeur of the great Mughals and their rich taste in art and architecture. Red Fort gives an identity to the whole nation. Its importance in present times can be understood by the fact that on Independence Day, national flag is unfurled on its ramparts. There are many things about Mughals and their rule in India. Let us explore them.
Babur established the Mughal Empire in India.
The Mughal dynasty laid its foundation in India in the early 16th century. The dynasty started with the coming of the first ruler, Babur, who crossed Afghanistan and reached the Punjab plains in 1526 AD. Babur was born in Farghana in 1483 and ascended the throne at a very young age. He defeated Ibrahim Lodi in the first battle of Panipat. Babur was succeeded by his son Humayun in 1530. He divided his inheritance equally among his brothers, according to the will of his father. He started the construction of the Purana Killa, but could not finish it. Humayun was defeated by Sher Shah Suri and had to flee to Iran. He died in 1556 due to an accident on the staircase. Humayun was succeeded by his very young son Akbar in the same year. Akbar expanded the kingdom from Kabul to Bengal. He built the walled city of Fatehpur Sikri in 1571. The Navratans, or the 9 courtiers, found an important place in Akbar's court. Akbar started the new religion, Deen-e-Ilahi. Jahangir succeeded the throne after Akbar in 1605. He was the first emperor to open relations with the British East India Company in India. His empress, Begum Noor Jahan, was the real power behind the throne. Shah Jahan was Jahangir's third son, who was born in Lahore in 1592. He was a great connoisseur of art and architecture, building monuments like the Taj Mahal, the Jama Masjid, and the beautiful Shalimar Gardens in Srinagar. The majestic peacock throne is also from his time. Aurangzeb was the last emperor who sat on the Mughal throne in 1658. He was an autocratic ruler who was deeply religious, believing in the Islamic law of Sharia. The Mughal Empire reached its zenith during Aurangzeb's rule. The territorial extent of the empire was short-lived, as revolts of subsidiary rulers challenged its integrity. By the 17th century, the Mughal Empire had lost its glory, but had left behind a political legacy few people could ignore.
Mughals. Babur, descendant of 2 great families, had the blood of Timurids and Mongols in his veins. Maternally, he was a descendant of Genghis Khan, ruler of the Mongol tribes in China and Central Asia. Paternally, he was a descendant of Taimur, the ruler of Iran, Iraq, and modern-day Turkey. Growth of the empire. Mughals, the height of their power around 17th century. The campaigns. Mughals invaded India as military rulers. Let us trace Babur's expedition to establish the Mughal rule in India. Babur's military campaigns. Babur fought various battles to strengthen the Mughal rule in India. Here are the names and years of the battles he had fought. 1526, defeated Ibrahim Lodi at Panipat. Akbar. In this topic we will understand how Akbar was successful in establishing a vast empire. Akbar was the son of Humayun. Akbar's military campaigns. After the death of Humayun, Akbar fought various battles to...
Yes children, in this way we have completed lesson number 4, the Mughal Empire. Read the lesson and understand it. So in the next session we will meet with the new lesson. Until then, bye, take care.